and welcome to We Will Talk About It, the Supernatural Rewatch podcast where we watch one episode every week, spoiler free. I'm Meghann.
I'm Kat.
And this week we are watching Season 1, Episode 13, Route 666.
I have been saying Route 66, obviously because America, but trying to say 666 without saying sex, 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 real hard for me. It's been real hard.
Well, fun fact.
Yes.
Route 666 is an extension of Route 66.
Oh.
But was renamed Route 491 in 2003 for hopefully obvious reasons to do with sign stealage and what have you.
Yeah.
So you and I, we've talked about this before we recorded this episode, that for both of us, this episode did make us feel a bit uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
It is a bit discomforting that the monster of the week is hate crimes and racially motivated murder, particularly coming now from 2021, you know, compared to myself in 2005, even myself in 2014 when I kind of got back into the show and started re-listening, like my context for this episode has definitely changed. In terms of how I feel about the monster of the week, how I feel about the kind of idea of Sam and Dean coming in, kind of white knighting it and saving the day. Like all of that kind of doesn't sit particularly well with me.
No.
It doesn't necessarily hold up. It wouldn't get made today.
No.
It wouldn't be written this way.
No, especially with the heroes being white men.
Yeah. So in the vein of continuing education, what I'm going to do in the show notes this week, Supernatural Wiki, of course, has collated a bunch of essays and sort of think pieces that have been written over the years by people of colour about race in Supernatural and how it's treated and how it's approached.
Yep.
It's not just about this episode, so fair warning, there are spoilers for later episodes and later characters that appear, but I do think that in this case it is best to elevate those voices who can speak much more eloquently than us and also speak from lived experience.
Yep.
So in the rest of this episode, we're probably not going to touch too much on the stuff that makes us uncomfortable just because it's not necessarily what the podcast is.
No.
But we wanted to lead in with that discussion and lead in with that conversation about how this episode made us feel.
Yeah.
So that we weren't not talking about it at all.
And we have been saying, like, in if you've been listening along from the beginning, thanks, guys. But also we have been talking about our feelings. And this one is probably the first one where both were like, we're cringing not because of, you know, CGI swarms or bugs. We're cringing because of the context and that, it's dated.
So let's talk about who wrote this episode and who directed it. This episode was written by Eugenie Ross-Lemming and Brad Buckner and directed by Paul Shapiro. Now, this episode was written in a week. And the reason for this, as best I can tell, and I don't fully understand because this seems to be a bit of like Hollywood stuff that I don't understand.
Yeah, Hollywood speak that we're like, sure.
The reason that it was written in such a short amount of time is because a script was lost that was meant to be filmed. I don't know what lost means in this context. Like
someone put in the shredder?
Someone flung their laptop into the sea. I don't.
All I can just see is like an intern who was like, it's their dream job to be in Hollywood. They're like 17 and they're running around getting coffee, and the next minute they didn't lose it. They just spilt, you know, they've spilled a coffee on like a very old school laptop.
Yeah.
And back then it's like, well, she's fucked.
Yeah, no cloud or anything. So I don't really know what lost means.
Lost in better comments.
But I know that the script that they intended to shoot was lost, and so Eugenie and Brad were brought in kind of last minute to...
This makes sense.
So some of the acting may be more that they're trying to make dialogue work that maybe isn't very polished.
Look, there is a part, and we will talk about it because that's the podcast essentially. But I was watching, I'm like, ooh, this is rough. And I cringed my way through the episode for more ways than one, but a lot of it was particular interactions and it just feeling, it definitely didn't feel like it was in sync with what we've been watching.
No, yeah, absolutely. I have quite a few notes on that and I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, cool.
For sure. But shall we get into the episode?
We should, oh boy.
So we open on Missouri. There is a man. He is a person of color. He is driving his car, and it's talking on the car radio. It's talking about like an unexpected cold snap, and it's really going to be very cold, sort of out of nowhere. And I just want to say, This episode was originally meant to be set in Louisiana, so in sort of the proper South.
Okay, yeah.
But of course, they're filming in Vancouver, and I'm guessing that they filmed this maybe December, January, and you'll notice that it starts to snow in a lot of the scenes because they're in Vancouver in the winter. And so they had to change the location to Missouri afterwards because they were like, it doesn't snow in Louisiana, so we can't. So they've changed it to Missouri, and I think they ADR'd, so additional dialogue recording.
Yep.
Layered over the like, oh, it's a really unexpected cold snap to explain why it's snowing in Missouri.
Yep.
out of nowhere. And it is very funny in this episode to kind of watch them try to be really, really casual about how many layers of clothes they're wearing, but like they're obviously wearing like tons of layers of clothes, and they've got gloves on at one point.
And probably are wearing like what's the clothes? Like long johns, but they're like thermal wear.
Thermals, yeah.
There we go. I was like, the long johns, wait, nope, thermals, there we go.
Yeah. So he is driving along. He starts to get interference in the car of the radio. Very
the old classic static radio crackle. It reminded me of because I'm watching. For those who don't know, I'm watching X-Files, and every time there is some kind of ooky spooky kabuki, badabuki thing happening, it's always the radio that crackles.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
It makes me giggle so much, and it made me giggle in this episode because I watched an episode of X-Files, and then I started watching this episode to obviously start for our podcast. And I'm like, it just made me giggle. I was like, oh, classic. So classic.
He is driving along. He starts to get this interference, and he sees a truck behind him.
Really high beams.
That is really high beams. It's got the lights on top of the car, like on top of the hood as well, and seems to be chasing him. And so he's accelerating. He's trying to get away. He thinks that he got away from the truck, and then it reappears and it crashes him essentially into a ditch. And it's honestly, for the rest of this episode, not been super one that I'm really into. This car crash looks really good.
Yeah,
like it's a
the chase
really
scene,
good.
It makes you feel like, this is not a good presence. This is not good.
No,
this is not good.
And the car crash itself is really well done. Like you can tell that it's a real car crash, that they really
Especially
they did it. Like it's really practical effects. So I really appreciated this initial car crash on a practical level. I always appreciate practical effects when people do them in shows, particularly a show like this that doesn't necessarily have a massive budget for practical effects,
especially in season 1.
But yeah, the car flips over and over and over, and obviously the implication is that this person has passed away.
Yeah. Now, just getting back onto the car. So
the truck or...
Oh, wait, sorry, the truck.
Yeah.
The spooky, ooky, kabuki mean truck. I'm going to call it mean truck.
Sure.
He was giving me some Jeepers Creepers vibe. Now, last week you said Jeepers Creepers 2.
Yes.
I'm bringing it back to OG1.
In Scarecrow, yeah. So 2 weeks ago for our podcast.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. We recorded last week. My apologies. So I've seen Jeepers Creepers 2, like, probably well after it actually came out. But I remember seeing Jeepers Creepers original with my good friend, Charmaine. We were teenagers, and I watched it at her house. She lived up the road from me. We were watching it at her house. Her parent, like her mum and her siblings were out of the house. We're watching it on beanbags, like we rented it from like Blockbuster.
Yeah.
So we were watching watching Jeepers Creepers with a baby Justin Long.
Aww.
He's in this movie, and like Jeepers Creepers, not obviously a TV show, Supernatural. And the truck in Jeepers Creepers with the Mothman, the evil thing, he had like a really scary truck, and he would scare, as you were saying, he got a good reaping in Jeepers Creepers too, because he got a bus full of kids.
Yeah.
He got twins.
Okay.
Justin Long and a chick.
I actually remember the trailer for the first Jeepers Creepers.
Yeah, so that's the one. So that's the one I remember. And so watching that, it was like mid-afternoon, school holidays. Like we were at 15, and we were walking. Like I had to walk home, and it was like not even a 5-minute walk. We literally lived on the same street, so a 5-minute walk. Anyway, I've said to Charmaine, I'm like, yo. I wouldn't have said yo because it was 2000s, but I was like, I don't want to walk home alone. I'm scared because we were petrified.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, we're walking along. Now we grew up in like a country town, and we were walking along, and there was a lot of older vehicles because a very well-established country town generally doesn't have new vehicles. No word of a fucking lie. this truck has come around the corner and was tooting his horn. Did we scream? And did my dad run down the stairs and leg it up the street to see what the hell was going on because he thought we were going to die? Yes, he did. So when I saw this truck, I'm like, oh, it's giving me Jeepers Creepers vibe. Flash tangent to 15-year-old cat can't walk home alone after seeing this movie, which is clearly fake as hell.
Oh, yeah.
And then
probably doesn't hold up today.
It doesn't hold up today. Oh, no, definitely does not. Seeing an older van, which I think it was tooting for, it must have been tooting because we weren't working on the road. We were working on like the embankment, but it was all flat off the side of the road. So I'm not too sure if he was tooting because he was just trying to spook some teenagers or he was just making sure that we were aware this very big van looking dodgy rape van was driving past. My God, we screamed so loud. Like, and in the country, and people who know me in real life, I'm very loud.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure some farm animals were deaf that day. They're like, I hear the world, now I don't because I heard a very high-pitched scream from a 15-year-old. So yeah, so that's when I saw this truck, every time it appeared in this episode, that's where my brain went to, like that particular event in my life.
Yeah, so it's funny because I actually had a really specific reference for the truck as well.
Oh, really?
Which is because it's not Jeepers Creepers. I've always thought that this truck does not look like a truck. We find out later this truck's meant to be from the 60s.
Yeah.
But I never felt like it looked like a truck from the 60s.
No.
The reference point I've always had from it, even from the first time I watched this episode back when I was 17, was the truck that Marty McFly gets at the end of Back to the Future. You know when you probably don't have a reference point for this.
Okay, so I'm just going to, guys, just letting you guys know, Meghann may cut this because I'll probably be buried in the backyard somewhere.
That's fine.
I saw Back to the Future in like 97 and I've never seen it since.
It's one of my favorite films.
Yeah, we don't speak about it in the household of the Morrison Smith family because Joel fucking loves all three and he quotes them often. He's like, you'd fucking know if you'd watch them. I'm like, yeah.
So I've just shown Kat a picture. I'll put the picture on Instagram as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you, like me, haven't seen Back to the Future.
If you haven't seen Back to the Future as many times as I have, the truck reminds me so much of the truck from Back to the Future, which is from the 80s. So it doesn't feel very 60s. And even our boy, your bestie, Eric Kripke, actually lists this as one of his least favorite episodes.
Yeah, I can see why.
For a bunch of reasons, but mostly because he doesn't think the truck is very scary. He thinks it's more monster truck than haunted truck, which I totally agree with.
It feels like it needs to be one of those like you know when you see the America with like the massive wheels and like they're meant to be like. I always think of The Simpsons where like Truckinator or whatever. Like it just gives me that like vibe. Yeah. It's more kooky, campy, spooky versus like this is actually going, murder rampage.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because obviously there are so many haunted car films. There's so many scary films.
Christine?
Yes, Christine is probably one of the biggest ones. Only because my dad will kill me if I don't reference this. My dad's favorite director of all time is Steven Spielberg, and he made me watch Steven Spielberg's first feature film, which was called Jewel, which is about a guy driving across the middle of America in the 70s, and he gets traced by a truck, and I think he dies in the end. It was not a very good film. I didn't enjoy it very much. But yeah, like there's tons of examples out there of kind of scary truck, haunted car, car chase, scary movies to reference, and this doesn't quite get there for this, even though it's very upsetting what happens.
The chain of events are upsetting, but the fear is more from us as the viewer watching the person in the other vehicle who is feeling scared and frightened. Yep. That's what we're feeding off that versus the whole energy of this vehicle is Murder Central. Yeah. But it's more like Murder Central, but it's also playing Wham. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
it doesn't quite land.
It doesn't, And it makes sense because, as you said at the beginning, with the whole writing of this episode in a week, there was probably I wonder if this was kind of off track and they, as you said, it's been written in a week, maybe the car was more dated for the original script and they in such short notice are like, well, we can't fucking change the car because, you know, Gary the intern, I'm saying Gary, I'm making him the story, Kat's little story corner. Gary the intern dropped the laptop and or dropped a coffee on the, he dropped a mocha frappuccino on the laptop, and now the laptop's fucked and there's no cloud, and there was definitely no USBs back then.
No, we were just getting them because I was in year 12 and I had, oh no, I still had floppy disks, but there were a few kids that had USBs of all of our gig.
Yeah.
Like you could put 3 documents on it.
Yeah. So it wasn't holding a script.
No.
It may have been, but yeah, I feel like Gary the intern fucked up, and then the two writers of the episode have had to come in and like make it work. And you know what? They're going, you know what? We'll just shoot the car or shoot the crazy murder truck in the actual proper dark and make sure it's dark as fuck with big glaring lights, and people won't notice. And it's like, well, people did notice.
So yeah, the other thing I do know about this episode is this episode was originally meant to be filmed entirely as a car chase. So from the perspective of the Impala, but like for budget reasons that was wildly expensive and they couldn't make that work.
It's the fucking Impala.
Because like at this time they're still using literal actual film to film these episodes. They have not transitioned to digital yet.
Yeah.
So a lot of the equipment's very heavy and expensive, so it didn't work. So yeah, again, I don't know what the original format of it. I don't know what they mean by an episode was lost. Like who knows what any of that means.
I said, it's Gary the intern.
Yeah. But we cut to the next day.
Yep.
And Dean is having a conversation on his phone. Sam is trying to figure out how to get around some roadworks that they've discovered to try and get to Pennsylvania for reasons that we never find out.
Yeah, it's undetermined.
Undetermined. And Dean gets off the phone and says, but we're not going to Pennsylvania. We're going to Missouri because we have a case from an old friend.
Old friend.
It's quickly established that this old friend is female in nature.
And we're not saying lover.
But we're not saying that either.
Yeah, that's right.
And Sam is like, well, like, why are we suddenly dropping things? Like, why would
Who
she
is this friend? What's she doing?
Why would she think that this is something that we would do? So they're in the car. They're driving to Missouri, and Dean clearly has told Sam what's happened, which is that Martin is the father of the girl, Cassie, who he was talking to on the phone, and that he passed away in very mysterious circumstances, that there was this car crash, and she would not have called if she wasn't sure that there was something that maybe Dean could help with. He reveals that he dated Cassie for a couple of weeks when he was waiting for his dad to wrap up a case, which is news to Sam, that he would date anyone for more than one night. And Sam sort of asks, like, how did she know what you guys do? Like, how does she know that we're hunters? And Dean kind of goes really quiet, and Sam is like, you told her our big secret. Like, the number one
family
rule.
Code. The family code.
We do what we do and we shut up about it.
That's right. Rule number 1 of Fight Club.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't talk about Fight Club.
Yeah.
And Dean is like, yeah, I guess I did tell her, and he's very kind of cagey about it and won't really talk about it.
Sam is so mad.
He
is so stroppy.
He is so pissed about this, particularly because he's like, I dated Jess for 1.5 years. We've established through the course of these episodes that Jess was definitely someone he saw himself having a future with.
Oh, yeah. I feel and again, Kat's family corner or Kat's story corner, 100%, he would have proposed to her, I think, if, this didn't happen, and we wouldn't know because, again, Supernatural would be made. I feel like once he got into Harvard Law and he was making, like, good 6 months after, I reckon it'd be 2 years, he would have proposed to her because it seemed like real love. Like, it wasn't just you're my university girlfriend and I'll get my real wife when I finish university and I'm done with you. I feel, like you said, the way the tone they've set for Sam and his vengeance. Well, it's been very much like she was the love of his life.
Yeah, absolutely. So we now cut back. We're at a newspaper office. We see the editor and we also see a woman who we presume is Cassie. They are both people of colour. And they're talking to the what is later discovered to be the mayor, who is a white man. And they're talking about the fact that there's been multiple deaths on this same road and that they have all been people of colour who have died. And their mayor is trying to downplay the dangers and downplay this. Yeah, he's a bit sort of sassy about it.
Putting Cass in a place a bit.
Yeah.
For reasons unknown until later in the episode.
Yes. Dean then shows up. And Cassie immediately only has eyes for Dean. Dean only has eyes for Cassie.
And this is where Kat's eyes glaze over because she is pulling the most, like, I'm so glad you're here, but fuck you. But I'm so glad you're here. Fuck you. And at this point, Kat's like, oh, God, I now remember this episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot to talk about here. Like, they're obviously two incredibly good-looking persons. Like, she's a stone cold hottie.
Oh, yeah, she is. She is.
So they're two real hotties. Throughout the episode, I think the fact that they're both deeply attractive kind of distracts from the fact that there's not a ton of chemistry.
There's no chemistry
between them.
Man, it'd be like rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. There is just friction. There's no moistness. I'm sorry. My brain went there. I'm so sorry. My brain's like, there is nothing here. And I was trying to think of like how two things don't connect. And I just went to just two pieces.
I may not recover from this. Because when you were saying two pieces of sandpaper, I was like, wait, what?
I'm so sorry.
Okay. I can do this. I can get through this.
But you know what I mean? Like there's just... Okay, all right, let me just try and think of a better way to phrase this.
No, let's move on.
Yeah, okay.
Let's move on.
There is zero, there's no, like, I'm calling it as I see it.
Yeah.
There is zero chemistry, and it could be because of the writing.
Yeah.
It's probably because of the writing.
Yeah.
But I also feel, and it's like nothing against either actor or actress. I think it's just some people gel better than others. And I think they would have played very good, like, if they were actual friends.
Yeah.
I felt more chemistry, even though there was probably chemistry, but we're not meant to know about it, when going back to Skin with, I can't think of a name, the sister of...
Oh, yes.
I felt more chemistry between her and Dean and her and Sam, and it's got nothing obviously to do with anything besides I just don't think they were the right...
Yeah.
They just weren't the right fit, and it was... They sort of, as the British would say, they soldiered on. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there was no good friction.
No, there definitely doesn't feel like there's a ton of chemistry. And I think that is kind of overridden by the fact that they're both competent actors.
Yep.
They're both very beautiful people to look at.
Yep.
And so I think that kind of overrides
Yep.
the naturalness of chemistry. And we'll talk a little bit about this a little bit later because I've got some sort of more specific things to say. Cassie reveals that Clayton, who was in business with her father, was the other person that had died on the road. They'd been friends for years.
Yeah.
And he was also a person of colour. Mm-hmm. But that before her father died, he had seen a truck that seemed to appear and disappear, that there were tracks leading to where he crashed, and it looked like he had been crashed into, but there was no evidence of another car.
Yeah.
And so all of that made her feel like there was something else going on, something that Dean and Sam should be investigating.
Yeah.
And that's why she's called them. We get a sense as well that they have some tension with how they ended things in terms of what happened between these two people.
And Sam in the background is just like, he is giving me the face of the Grinch, of when he's just like, the evil smile. He is just like, this is going to feed me for a week. Oh, the drama. And he's not meddling and he's not poking and he's not trying to fuck with shit, but he's also just like, oh, I'm mad, but this is going to be entertaining for me.
Yes.
And I understand this because I am that petty person too.
Oh, yes. So after they've had this discussion, they cut to another car crash. Jimmy, the editor of the newspaper that we met earlier, has also been killed.
Yep. Similar fashion to the other persons of colour.
Yeah,
victims.
And we then cut to the next day. Cassie is there. She's talking to the mayor again. She's very feisty about her discussion.
So sassy back.
She's Max Moxie in this episode.
Oh, yeah,
you can definitely see in theory why Dean would be into her.
Oh yeah, because she's an independent person.
Yeah.
Who is like standing her ground, standing by her truth, which is exactly how people should live their lives. But yeah, I can see on paper, because you feel like she's very much playing the person they've written, and that's fine. But again, it's just so this is probably in top 5 of episodes I fucking hate. Yeah, for many reasons, and this is a big one because it's so unbelievable. It's like watching Days of Our Lives, which is where Jensen may have spent some time in his previous acting life. Yeah, it just doesn't seem believable.
Yeah.
On paper, fine. Person, no.
Yeah, exactly. Cassie asks if the mayor would consider closing the road if the people who had died were white.
Yep.
This episode, and I know at the start of the episode we said we weren't going to talk a ton about kind of how we feel about the broader strokes of this episode in the episode, just because it's not the content of our podcast. But I just want to say, like, this show doesn't have the nuance to approach things like this in a way that feels,
organic.
Feels like it's going to give it the time and space that it needs and should have, basically. And so this sentence is really powerful sentence, but it's just not in the right show to, I think, appropriately cover it.
Yeah, it's very much like it doesn't seem like it's powerful, but it's in the next sentence it's lost.
Yeah,
because again, it's a fast moving show. It has a story to tell in 40 to 45 minutes, not including credits. Not including ad breaks, obviously, back then.
Yeah, exactly. And the mayor replies, like, are you calling me a racist?
Yeah. I know.
And if you think I'm a racist, you should talk to your mother about it.
And it's the clapback for me.
All of this is a bit irky to me, and it sort of does play out ultimately, because we haven't really talked about it, but it is revealed early on that Cassie's mother is white and her father is black, so it was an interracial relationship. So we now sort of have a couple of really quick cutscenes where Sam and Dean, like, this is really edited really tight.
They've really,
so Sam and Dean get ready, get into their sort of big boy suits to go pretend to be insurance people,
brokers,
I don't really, insurance assessors.
There we go. I was like, assessors.
Talking to a friend of Jimmy's to see if Jimmy had ever heard of, had ever mentioned any hallucinations such as a truck. And one of the men that he's speaking to said, well, back in the 60s, people of colour, men of colour in particular, were disappearing off the roads, and it was always said that they would disappear into a black truck, but no one ever knew who it was or where they went. They just disappeared, and for the time, no one investigated.
Because of that particular time period.
Which is sort of... Sam and Dean realise that this is a haunted truck. They realise it's a vengeful spirit.
Like a bit like Flying Dutchman kind of story, but way worse.
Yeah, very different in a lot of ways.
Very different.
And Sam and Dean are still talking about, and Sam says, okay, I'll go do some research. You go talk to Cassie, because it seems that, like, it seems to be circling around your family and like her family and circling around their lives.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what's going on. And Sam is like, oh, and while you're there, you could talk about your enormous unfinished business that you have with each other.
Your enormous business that may be in your pantaloons. I don't know.
And they have this really interesting conversation where Sam's kind of needling Dean, but also
he's being that younger brother,
but also kind of, being like, oh, I think you're still in love with her. Like, why did you dump her? And Dean just, like, stops, and Sam realizes that actually Cassie dumped Dean. Dean didn't dump
It's that
Cassie.
look of, it's like, what? I can't have feelings too.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting. And this is what I was kind of going to get to with the chemistry, is that the writing in this episode is not the best. It's a bit rough in places. We'll talk about some rough dialogue that's about to come up. But I think that with chemistry, the chemistry between Jensen and Jared, which is so palpable and so there, it overcomes this rougher dialogue to make it into something better, where you sort of get
it's mediocre. It's this great dialogue between those two. You're like, you're by this stage, you've definitely brought in that they're brothers. Yeah. And they have a very complex and complicated relationship at times. And you're very right. Like, especially that look that he just, it's almost like that steel, angry, fuck you, you don't bring up my hurt. And Sam not making, like, there's no words being spoken, but it's all just face.
Yeah.
And you're like, it wasn't you. This is a plot twist. Like, whoa.
And again, we've talked about this a few times, of the idea that Dean puts on a brave face, that he has this bravado.
Yep, switches off those emotions.
Switches off these emotions, performative masculinity, one might say.
Yes.
But underneath it, he's quite vulnerable. And this seems to be a time where he maybe was quite vulnerable with someone. He told her the big secret, the big family secret.
And they were only dating for weeks. Like,
and
how intense.
She dumped him. and just kind of how for someone who's quite brave on the outside and got that bravado but quite vulnerable on the inside might feel about being shut down or let down by someone who he thought maybe he could figure out a way to have a life with.
Yeah.
Which is definitely implied through this episode, which is that Dean thought there was going to be something happen between them and that maybe she did too, but she was the one that shut it down.
Yeah.
And now we get to the bit that with the scenes with the roughest dialogue, but I still have a lot to talk about. So Dean goes to talk to Cassie. They have a big fight. The dialogue's pretty rough. You don't get a lot of chemistry from either of them.
It is
for each other in themselves. Their acting is them doing their best.
And it also feels like it's so dry. It's drier than the damn desert. Like it is rough. It is my elbows when I haven't moisturized for a week. It's fucking rough. Like it is rough as sandpaper.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. But then they fuck.
It is the weirdest, artsiest fucking scene.
I'll also say, for 2005, this is a pretty horny sex scene. Because 2005, the girl never took her bra off, and she's clearly got her bra off.
She's on top.
I have a note about that I'm going to talk about in a sec.
Oh my God.
But she bites his nipple, which is kind of properly horny.
That's right. We're seeing some men nip.
This is some actual kind of horny behavior. Because sex scenes in the early 2000s were pretty
It's not even
tame.
a sex scene. You know what it is? It's not even just a straight sex scene. It's a hate. It's almost like not a hate fuck, but it's on that vein of like tension fuck.
Attention fuck. Yeah, I'd say it's not a hate fuck. It's like
there's no hate. It's just
you're right.
It's a tension.
Tension fuck.
Tension fuck.
But yeah, it's pretty for the 2005. Like the sex scenes at the time, like we're all living in a post kind of Game of Thrones world with sex scenes where they're very, Bridgerton obviously is pretty big, has been pretty big this year, and it's just horny sex scenes. But in 2005, sex scenes were pretty tame, particularly for quote-unquote teen shows, which was
TV shows.
And particularly on television. And this is a pretty horny sex scene.
It goes for like a good minute and a half. Like it's not even just they're going, shut the door, dark scene. You may see them rolling around in the bed, which I've always found really funny, as obviously if you have had less sexy times, you ain't doing that when you haven't sexy times. No. You're not rolling yourself up in like a blanket burrito.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're very right. I was watching it and I was like, okay, it's going to cut soon. It's going to cut soon. Yeah. Oh my God, I have forgotten that this is porn.
Yeah, it's pretty horny for the time that it was filmed in.
I do like how the artistic flair of them darking out bits so we can't see bits, essentially see bits.
So apparently, the studio actually gave them a note. So they don't get a lot of notes about like the violence in Supernatural, but they got a note from the network to say that the girl can't be on top. But
she
was very briefly on top, and then they like flipped it round. But I think in the original script, maybe she was the power. She was the top.
I was gonna say, was she the power top?
She was the top in the sexual relationship, which like fuck you. CW for fuck you for that, but like I did think it's interesting. So I have more to say about this sex scene, but a little
20 minutes later.
But a little bit more specifically, I want to talk about me as a 17-year-old watching this sex scene.
Yes.
It's not going to go where you think it's going to go. Oh. It's going to go a funnier place. So as a 17-year-old,
is this a story you've been holding on for a while?
Yes.
Fantastic. Strap in.
Yes.
I mean, not strap on, strap in.
Yes.
Yes. Sure.
Sorry, Charmaine.
Yeah. R.I.P.
So, as a 17-year-old, I had the wonderful, the glorious gift, which is that I bought a television from a Trash and Treasure at the local Fate for $50. Didn't have a remote or anything. It was from like 1995. But it meant that I could have a television in my bedroom.
That was yours.
That was mine, which for y'all young teens out there, if there's anyone out there listening that's like proper Gen Z, y'all don't understand. This meant that I could watch whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, without my sister's input, without my parents' input, up to and including horny stuff uninterrupted. But my parents had a tendency. They would knock on the door. but they wouldn't pause. There was no pausing.
Oh.
The knock would come as the door was opening. So I need you. So me watching this sex scene, because I remember this very clearly. I want you to come with me. Come back to 2006.
I'm here.
17-year-old Meghann. Her walls are papered with Orlando Bloom and Travis Fimmel. Because yes, guys, before he was in Vikings, he was a dolly model.
He was on Home and Away.
And he was on Home and Away. And I've got my little single bed. And at the end of the bed is my like dressing table, and that's where my TV is sitting.
Yep.
Now, my TV doesn't have a remote because it's 2000. It's from 2000. It's 2006. It's a TV from 1995.
Did it have the dials?
It didn't have the dials, but it had the click buttons. So you
click
click
buttons,
between. So if I was watching a sex scene, because my parents tended to knock and then immediately enter, and my sisters often wouldn't knock because they're assholes. Sorry, guys. I would watch sex scenes like on the end of my bed with my finger on the button to change the channel, so that if someone entered the room, please note, guys, I was raised Catholic, and shame about sex is really real. So like
what?
Pressed up against the TV, so close, enjoying this sex scene so much.
It's almost a threesome if you're that close to the damn TV.
My parents came into my bedroom, I would press the channel, change it to like ABC or something innocent, and like fling myself back on the bed so it looks like I was watching the 7:30 report the whole time, and definitely nothing horny. And that's how I used to watch sex scenes, because I had my own TV, which was wonderful, but I had parents with no boundaries, which was less wonderful.
Yeah.
And so I'd watch them ready at any moment to be interrupted.
Boy,
like, if you're a parent out there and you've got teenage children, all I ask is just knock, pause, and then enter. Just let us jack off in peace.
Yeah, look, and honestly, that was my parents.
That was not my parents.
I mean, yeah, there was at least a pause. I've never been walked in on.
Yeah.
Watching horny sex scenes, or as you said, jacking off.
So many times.
Oh man, like, oh boy,
The stress.
Look.
But I've watched like so many sex scenes with my dad, and he was like the king of making me uncomfortable. Like, he was the king of it. So 2 brief stories. This is a dad-centric podcast. My dad doesn't listen, thank God. He's actually banned. I've banned him from listening. I'm like, I love that you like that to know that I have podcasts, but you're never allowed to listen because of the things that I say.
So what happened when you were back then watching this sex scene?
Oh, so this sex scene, like, there's no real story. I don't remember being like, oh, this is so horny. I just remember that that's how I would have watched it. But two quick stories. Firstly, my dad, I watched The Life of Brian with him for the first time by myself, and there's full frontal male nudity.
Yeah,
that was the first time I'd ever seen a dick in real life. I was like 14 years old. And I didn't know it was going to happen. And I almost melted into the couch. I was so uncomfortable when it did. Like, I don't know that I've ever been more embarrassed in my entire life. But when horny stuff would start to happen on television and I was watching something with my dad, I would always be like, oh, I think I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea. Without fail, my dad would be like, oh, okay, don't worry. I'll pause it. So we can, when you come back from making the cup of tea, we can watch it together. So I'm just going to pause it now for you, and then when you come back from making the cup of tea, we'll keep watching this scene, because I'm sure you don't want to miss this scene. My dad is my hero and I love him to death, and he's my favorite person, and he was exactly the sort of dad that you would expect for teen daughters.
Yeah, look. Yeah, my dad was very much that person. Like, he would lean in on that hard shit, but at the same time, I would watch it, and I would, you know, as you're watching movies and there's sex scenes, I would try not to melt into the ground. I don't know why. Like, I wasn't ashamed, and my parents were obviously quite open-ish about sex. Obviously, you know, you got 2 teenage daughters, and one of them is with a long-term teenage boyfriend. You're going to make the assumption that, you know, P's and V's are doing something together.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, I don't think my dad's ever thought about me having sex, and he probably never will.
I mean,
but
fair.
which
you
is
are married. I mean,
he's just like, that's absolutely none of my business. And also Catholic shame is.
I just also love that there's
hardcore.
like 2 sides of your dad about you and you being a sexual being.
Yeah,
in the sense that he loved to torment you about this, about like, I'm going to pause this very clearly uncomfortable scene that is of the sexual nature. But then also, as you in real life, he's like, oh, you don't have sex. You are Barbie doll.
Yeah.
You and your husband are both Barbie and Ken, and you have no bits.
Yeah.
Therefore, you cannot insert bits into bits.
Yeah, pretty much. And
I love it. I just think it's so great. I've not met your dad. But I think it's fucking great.
Yeah. I love my dad, but that's pretty much him in a nutshell. So they're fucking.
They're tension fucking.
We cut back to the mayor. He is looking at some plans, and he also gets killed by the truck.
Yeah.
And so
he gets flipped on the side of the road almost.
Yeah.
It is
and
brutal.
it's pretty brutal. Some like pretty cool like VFX makeup. Like it looks really good.
He actually looks dead.
He looks properly dead. And obviously this breaks the pattern because, as we established earlier on, that the mayor is a white man. And so far all of the deaths have been men of colour.
Yep.
We now cut back to Cassie and Dean post-coital. This is, for me, the roughest dialogue in the episode. It is, as you said, it's very Days of Our Lives. And, you know,
I'm glazing over. Sorry, Meghann. I can't give you much.
the
talent's phoning it in today.
Again, I think this really demonstrates that like chemistry can make such a difference to rough dialogue, because Sam and Dean have a lot of scenes in this episode. The dialogue hasn't been the best dialogue.
It's very clunky at best.
But it works because they have such phenomenal chemistry with each other, and they have really built this relationship, and, you know, they're sort of however many months into filming. And spoiler alert, in case, I guess, you are new to Supernatural and this is all new to them, they are literally best friends in real life. It's just, it doesn't feel very believable.
It's
like
not organic.
The dialogue's a bit clunky. It's not very consistent with Dean, the character that we're coming to learn. And like I said, like, we know that there's layers to him. We know that he's vulnerable underneath, but the dialogue is very Days of Our Lives, and so it doesn't really fit with the rest of the story.
If someone out there wants to put like the Days of Our Lives, you know, music over
and filter
and like put like, so they're all like bubbly and shiny and have this like weird aura about them, but then also put the back, like the tension noise background post coitus, because obviously Days of Our Lives had many post coitus conversations. You could think it would be like, oh, this is Days of Our Lives. It's just clunky, and I'm not blaming, you know, Jensen. I'm not blaming the actress. I'm sorry, I don't know her name.
Meghann.
Thank you.
I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because I know how annoying it is when your name's not pronounced correct, but I'm pretty sure it's Meghann.
Yeah, they're both great actors. When they're not in scenes together, they're really good. But it's when they're together, and I don't know if it's the it's a lot of combination of things. They're just not right for each other to fit, to be believable.
Yeah. So things ramp up after this because they realise that the mayor has been killed in the same way, but he is obviously white. This is definitely also where you start to realise that why they changed it to Missouri instead of Louisiana, because it is legitimately like there's snow everywhere now. It's actually snowing when they're filming.
Yeah, and everyone's wearing like overcoats and there's a lot of layers of clothing. And yeah, because at that stage, Cass's mum comes home. And because we met Cass's mum for the first time.
Yes. So they have done a bit of research, and they realise
off-screen.
They've done some research of the Dorian family, who are a very wealthy white family in the area.
Yep.
That the mayor had purchased the old Dorian house many years ago, not too long ago, and had immediately knocked it down.
Yep.
And that's exactly when the murders had started.
Yeah.
They also realised that Cyrus Dorian, one of the sons, had disappeared back in the 60s and was never seen, but that he used to drive a big black truck.
And also the newspaper which Cass works at was owned by the Dorian family as well.
Exactly. So now we have a scene with Cassie's mum, and this actress does a phenomenal job.
Oh yeah, it's a good scene. Again, it's the writing, and I apologize. Like, I know everyone's they literally slapped a couple of pipe cleaners and called it a day kind of scenario. It's very. They phoned it in, and I get it, understand. Goddamn Gary and the intern. Gary the intern just really fucked us over. But yeah, you're right. She really, and like you empathize, you understand the story, what we're about to find out from Cass's mum.
Yeah, so Kathleen Noon is the actress. I think she does a phenomenal job of telling this story of how she dated Cyrus, but she was also seeing Martin in secret. It was the 60s. Interracial couples were not seen as a positive thing.
They were not.
And eventually she broke it off with Cyrus and decided to marry Martin, who's ultimately was Cassie's father.
Yep.
And this is in amongst this story of people of men of color disappearing into this black truck. And on the night that they were intended to be married, they decided to elope instead. And that night, the church burned down
where they were going to get
married. And there was a choir in there,
a children's choir,
and they all died. And that not long after that, Martin was taken by this truck, which was driven by Cyrus, in case anyone hasn't worked that out. And Cyrus started to beat him. Obviously, the subtext of this, and again, this is where this episode delves into some pretty serious stuff, but doesn't have the nuance to really approach it appropriately.
They graze the surface, but they don't delve deep.
No, not at all, into racially motivated murders and, you know, how much that occurred.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it still occurs in a lot of places in the world, particularly in America, in this particular context at least. And he fought back, and he ultimately killed Cyrus, and and Jimmy, who was the editor, and Randall? Was it Randall? Clayton. I'm sorry. In my head, I'm like, it's a really American name, Clayton. Him and Clayton and Jimmy hid the truck in the swamp and swore to never speak about it. And the mayor had been investigating
He was a cop.
Had been investigating the disappearance of Cyrus and decided to do nothing about it once he realized what had happened.
Yeah.
And Dean sort of very innocently, and for me, this was kind of my level of innocence in 2005, goes, well, why didn't you call the cops? And she looked at him and she was like, it was the 60s. Like, there was no way that they were going to get justice for what happened.
No.
And so.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot that happens in her dialogue, because it's just her speaking for a couple of minutes and you're just like, oh shit, this gets really heavy. And the story, like, she loved Martin so much. Cyrus was going to propose. She broke it off before he could propose. He got angry. He became vengeful. Once he found out that Cass's mum was going to marry Martin and they were going to get married in this church. So the implication, we don't know as such, like it's not for out, like Cyrus burnt down the church, but the implication is that out of retaliation, he burned the church down.
So that same night, Cassie is in the house alone, and now so before we get this story, Cassie had been alone in the house and the truck had come to get her. And this is kind of where I see what Eric Kripke was saying, that like it is very stupid that she's in a house, she's safe, and the truck is like stalking her around the house. Like, it's not very effective in terms of being scary. Like, what's the truck going to do?
It just reminds me of Futurama's version of Christine, where Bender's is like, ha-hoo! It's very stupid. But obviously with Futurama, the nuance is it's meant to be stupid, whereas this just seems silly. And she's like, I'm scared. I'm in a house and this truck is going to get me. It's like, you're in a 2-story house. It's a ghost truck. Yeah. You can't enter the truck.
Yeah.
It's not the ghost in this, the presence is the truck, not Cyrus the person.
Yeah. So Sam and Dean realize they need to go and get the truck out of the swamp. They need to burn the remains. Salt and burn the remains.
Salt and burn.
To get rid of the ghost of Cyrus. So that's what they do. They go off and they burn the remains, but that doesn't work.
We're taking a beat back. When they get to the lake, the swamp, the whatever they go.
Yeah.
Where the fuck did Dean get the goddamn, like, tractor from? Because he just was the tractor just, like, reverse parked, ready to go? Like, it's never explained. And when I was watching, I'm like, okay, because there is a cut scene if you're watching it on Stan, there is a cut scene. I'm not too sure if it's on the DVD, but there is a cut scene where they've got this plan, they know what you need to do, and then all of a sudden, Dean's just, like, reversing this tractor so they can be wenched onto we presume. I'm like, also, I love how they found the truck in the water quite quickly without scooping, like, it's just nonsense. But then when as he's like bringing the tractor forward to then hoist out the evil truck, my brain was like, what? Where? How? Who? When? Huh? I was very confused. And then it's just never spoken of. Like, they go, oh, yeah, this is Jimmy's truck and we obviously are in Jimmy's land or we're on Blah land. We've just rocked up with a tractor. It's like, did you go into town and go, who has a tractor? You do? Can we borrow it? Why? Reasons unknown, you don't need to know. Like, you need to know business. It's like, no one's going to lend 2 boys a tractor. And the presumption is like, is it Cass's? Because is the swamp close to their house? Because tractors, coming from a country town, tractors on the road don't move fast.
No. So, yeah, I don't think we've got an explanation for that.
Sorry.
But
Kat getting bogged down in the small nitty-gritties, asking the questions that no one's asking.
Don't pull the thread. Yeah. but it actually just makes the spirit more angry.
Oh, yeah.
And so Dean gets in the Impala and he is going to sort of distract the truck while Sam tries to burn the whole truck.
Which is also wet.
Yes. So Dean is driving around. He's driving the Impala around. He's being chased by this truck. He's talking to Sam on the phone. Don't talk on the phone, guys, when you're driving. Yeah. But understand the circumstances, and this was in the time before we had Bluetooth.
Yeah. Also, this is the time where it wasn't really... Like, it was starting to become a thing. Like, don't text and call and drive because people die.
Yeah. But Sam's trying to burn the truck. He realizes it's not going to work. And so he comes up with the plan of luring the truck to the place where the original church was, because church ground is still hallowed ground, even if the church isn't there.
Yep.
And that will hopefully dissipate the spirit. So he's getting Dean to drive along this road. He gets information from Cassie about where to go and where to drive. He tells Dean where to go. Dean is driving along. Sam's like, you have to stop at this particular point where you've gone X amount of miles, which Dean does. And then he's like, okay, stop. And Dean's like, okay, what am I doing now? And he's like, well, what's the truck doing? He's like, it's just like watching me.
It's like, I think it was like a quarter, like a seventh of an eighth of a mile or something. And us
inexplicable distances to us.
Yes, we are on the metric system.
Yes, as we all should be, guys.
Yeah. What is that in kilometers?
Who knows? I didn't look it up and I'm not going to.
No.
But
it seems a bit like of an odd detail to, like, it just seems like a little bit, why do I need to know this? But yeah, I don't know where the tractor came from, you know?
Yes. And so Sam is like, well, you're waiting for the truck to come for you.
Yeah.
And Dean's like, what?
Yeah.
And
Dean is not happy.
Sam is a loose cannon in this episode. Like, this is such a wild plan. So the truck burns towards Dean. It obviously crosses that hallowed ground and disappears. Pretty shitty CGI. And CGI swarm in the end of this. And Dean is like talking to Sam after, and he's like, what would you have done if that hadn't worked? And Sam's like, I didn't really even think about that. And Dean just gets back in the car like, what? You didn't even think about it. You didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
And this is one bit of dialogue that I really like, is this little exchange between them. It's very funny. It's very well delivered by both of them.
And I think because they know what's up. Mm-hmm. And they probably had, I feel like they've read the script and gone, oh, we're going to have to really pull in double time to really get this over the line. Mm-hmm. And correct, boys, correct. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just I think it's just Jensen's delivery of just being like, this fucking guy.
Yeah, this motherfucker.
Yeah, this motherfucker.
And that's the thing, like, Jensen and Jared have already really started to establish a really strong sense of who their characters are. And so I think that's why this episode in so many ways feels so out of place, because it's so out of character. Yeah. Like, again, I do like the idea that there's a more vulnerable Dean, because we are starting to see that there is this more vulnerable side to him that wants maybe something different to what he officially says. But I just don't think this episode captured who Dean is or how he would communicate this stuff.
Sam's kind of neglected. He's kind of like, he's the third wheel of this dry as the Sahara Desert chemistry that is being produced from this episode. And so he's kind of in the background just being like the annoying little brother, even though that's not actually what he's actually doing. Yeah. And we don't really get much research. We don't get to see Sam digging into things and finding out why and how. It's all we only find out because of Cass's mom. Yeah. Who's the only survivor from that particular circle of the actual chain of events from Cyrus. It's just very clunky. And I keep saying clunky. I'm sorry, guys. It's just, Kat's had it. She's bullshit meter is
over it. It's officially
over it officially. If you understand, if you know the reference, you know what it's about. Like, my bullshit meter is like 2 more eyebrows, and I'm currently overflowing. Yeah, it's just I feel sorry for the actress, because I feel like she's a great actress, but the script, the story, clunky at best.
Yeah, absolutely.
0 stars.
So we get to the next day. Dean is saying goodbye to Cassie, and he sort of floats the idea of maybe they will have a future together. Maybe he'll see her again. And she's like, I'm a realist. I don't see much of a future for us.
Especially when you hunt ghosts for a living.
Yeah. And he's, that we're just in such different places. And he's like, well, I've seen stranger things happen. And she sort of looks him dead in the eye and says goodbye. And, again, this is where I wish that this was a better written episode. This idea of kind of Dean in a way being let down again and, you know, again trying to put his heart out there a little bit and sort of getting shut down.
He got his tension fuck. I mean, in her head, she's like, I think how the episode should have played out is like once they had that exchange, the release of tensions, that I'm guessing from her character's perspective was the final chapter. Like that was the full circle moment. She's closed that chapter in her life. She can move on. Whereas Dean, it should have, and again, it's the delivery. It's everything. The story. I see where they were going with it. Like that was for her a closure. That for him was an opening. Yeah. And, you know, they've missed their own different wavelengths because of Dean's job and where, you know, Cass is going with her, you know, being a journalist, and now she's going to be taking over the newspaper of the local town. So
I love that you've given her that story that's not discussed in the show.
I know, but I mean, a lot of things are discussed in this fucking episode. But, you know, I'm here once again.
We're just filling in the blanks, explaining the after story of all of the characters.
It may become a thread. I don't know. But I'm going to fix this because I feel I'm a fixer. Yeah. And this needs to be. Yeah. This needs.
Kat fixes the episode. Yeah. I will say, spoiler alert, but again, kind of like with Dean's alleged secret in Bloody Mary that never went anywhere, we never see Cassie again.
Nope.
This is another dead end plot point that ends. I do want to have, so I play a little fun game when I see actors kiss each other of like, do we think they're good kissers in real life? Because I'm under the sneaking suspicion that Colin Firth is not a good kisser in real life.
Oh no, he looks.
If you look at him kissing in films, and I love Colin Firth, it just doesn't look great. But do we think Jensen and Meghann are good kissers in real life based on this final kiss that they have before they say goodbye?
Not with each other. Not with each other. It doesn't. Again, it goes back to the whole chemistry and things. Their bodies aren't meant to be kissing each other.
Okay.
I feel like separately, if I wonder, like the way that Cass is written, I feel like she would be more up Sam's alley in the sense of, you know, they're both intellectual, they're a little bit sassy, they're both headstrong, but in their own right, whereas Dean's like bravado. Yeah. I don't see it as headstrong. I see bravado moxie. Yeah. I see her as moxie undertones, but she's headstrong, she's smart. Not saying that Dean's not. He's more street common sense. Sam is more definitely leans on that intellectual side. So I feel like they could, if they kissed, I'd be like, I mean, now it's just a porno because I'm like, she kisses Dean and now she's kissing Sam and now we're in some incest.
Now we're in a plot of that absolutely exists on the internet.
Oh, I know
it's got to exist on the internet. No, I think they're both good kissers in real life, but just not to each other. We've got more time to assess if Jensen's a good kisser. Don't worry, guys. Don't worry.
That's what we're here for. We will talk about it.
But that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, so guys, this one was a very weird. I'm sorry if you're going to be hearing us going, oh, yeah. It was one of those episodes. Yeah. It was.
Do you want to hear something really disappointing?
Oh, no.
This episode has the highest rating of any Supernatural episode that was ever aired. The most people watched this episode out of any of the 327 episodes. The most people watched this episode. Obviously, it's all approximates. It's all complicated things with who has TVs on. Yeah. I don't really know how they track it. But, yeah, theoretically, this had the best, I know, isn't that such a bummer? But that's the end of the episode, guys. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Go subscribe on your favorite podcast. If you can, please leave us a rating on iTunes, preferably 5 stars. You can follow us on Instagram. We Will Talk About It Pod. On Twitter, we are We Will Talk Pod. You can email us at wewilltalkaboutitpod@gmail.com. Tell a friend.
Tell a work colleague.
That you think might like the show. If you were playing the drinking game, I hope you had a fun time. I don't think we hit many things. I did say moxie a couple of times.
I also did say double shot for tension fuck.
For tension fuck, which is
by this stage you're no longer with us. Yeah, and
so apologies
to your vital organs.
So in the meantime, stay safe and enjoy some tension fucking.
Ooh,
bye guys.
Bye.